So let's talk about Nepal. The year 2025. It was, to put it lightly, a year of massive, profound transformation for the country. I mean, we're talking huge shifts in politics, brand new protections for human rights, and some really innovative moves in the global fight against climate change. It was a year that really put Nepal at a crossroads.
And just look at this timeline. It really gives you a snapshot of how quickly things were moving. In June, you've got this landmark court ruling. By September, a political firestorm forces the prime minister to resign. Then, boom, in November, a major payment for environmental protection, followed in December by a whole new framework for climate action. So let's break down how all these pieces fit together.
First up, let's get into the most dramatic event of the year, this sudden, incredibly powerful political uprising that just completely shook the nation's leadership. And the wild part? It was driven by its youngest citizens.
So you have to ask yourself, what does it take to get thousands of people out on the streets demanding their government step down? You know, in a lot of places, it's years of tension just simmering below the surface. But in Nepal in 2025, the trigger was something really specific and very, very modern.
That's right. The government, out of nowhere, just banned 26 major social media platforms. Now, this was seen by pretty much everyone as a blatant attempt to shut down criticism and silence dissent. But wow, did it have the opposite effect. It was the spark that lit the entire fuse.
And this is the crucial part. While that social media ban was the trigger, it wasn't the real cause. The fuel for this fire was this deep, simmering frustration over rampant government corruption, a real hunger for more personal freedom, and just a desperate need for something to be done about youth unemployment.
And that's what makes this whole thing so significant. This was a Gen Z-driven uprising. We're talking students, young people who felt like their future was being stolen right out from under them. It just threw a spotlight on this powerful public demand for accountability, and it really echoed a lot of other youth-led movements we've seen popping up across the region.
And the results came fast. Unbelievably fast. By September 9th, with protests escalating, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli announced he was resigning. And in his place, an interim government was formed, led by Sushila Karki. Now get this, she's a former Supreme Court Chief Justice and, most importantly, Nepal's very first female head of government. A historic moment.
Okay, let's shift gears. Because while the streets of Kathmandu were erupting, something much quieter but honestly no less revolutionary was happening inside Nepal's highest court. It was a change that would redefine the very meaning of justice and land ownership for millions.
So back in June, months before the protests even kicked off, the Supreme Court issued this historic order. And this wasn't just another ruling. No, this was a fundamental directive to every single level of government, federal, provincial, and local, about how they must treat indigenous peoples.
So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, the court basically ordered the government to fully implement international law. That means officially recognizing indigenous identity and culture, protecting their rights to their ancestral lands, and, this is the big one, requiring their consent for any projects that affect them.
And that brings us to this term you see here, FPIC. It stands for Free, Prior, and Informed Consent, and it is a game changer. It means that indigenous communities now have the legal right to say yes or no to any project, whether it's a dam, a mine, a highway, you name it, that impacts their lands and their lives. It literally shifts power directly into the hands of the communities themselves.
And that leads us to our third and final piece of this puzzle. It shows how Nepal is taking these incredibly innovative, even world-leading steps on the climate stage. They're actually turning their environmental responsibilities into real economic opportunities. This is so fascinating. So, Nepal updated its National Climate Action Plan, but it didn't just focus on emissions. It directly linked its climate goals to social justice, calling for 50% female representation in the groups that manage community forests and demanding legal protections for local land use.
And guess what? This new approach is already paying off, and I mean that literally. In November, Nepal received a payment of $9.4 million from the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. So, how did they earn it?
Well, they earned it by successfully cutting CO2 emissions by almost 1.9 million tons. And it was all done through community-led forestry programs. This is just direct proof that protecting forests can generate real, tangible income for a country.
So how does this whole carbon trading thing actually work? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward.
In December, Nepal launched a national framework for it. Step 1. Local communities protect their forests. Step 2. This reduces carbon emissions. And Step 3. Those reductions are measured, they're turned into credits, and then they're sold on the international market, bringing money right back to those communities.
Okay, so let's put it all together. You've got a political uprising, a landmark legal ruling, and a pioneering climate policy. Let's step back and see how these three, seemingly separate stories, connect to define this critical turning point for Nepal.
Because when you look at them all together, you realize these aren't just isolated incidents. They're all symptoms of a nation going through this profound reevaluation. You're watching a country grapple with these huge fundamental questions of who holds power, whose rights are protected, and how to build a sustainable future in a rapidly changing world.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? We've seen the incredible power of activism on the streets, we've seen the undeniable force of constitutional law, and we've seen the innovation of government policy. The real challenge for Nepal moving forward is whether these three powerful forces can actually align to build a genuinely new, more equitable, and sustainable future for everyone.